So, because the media was forced to report the news and facts about the Russian collusion hoax and the indictments that might be coming down from a grand jury, well, some outlets actually took the story seriously and engaged in what could be described as a debate over whether the concerns are legitimate, whether the Justice Department is really looking to pursue the truth and prosecute crimes if they occurred. Kind of a debate happened. Over on CNN, Van Jones thinks this is much ado about nothing. Scott Jennings, our colleague here at Salem Media, he took a different approach, and it was beautiful.
Well, I think we're downplaying what's been found. And, with respect to my sparring partner here, Van, half the country and one entire political party has an article of faith that Russia stole the 2016 election. Now, how did they come to that conclusion? They came to that conclusion because high-ranking Democrats, many of whom had intelligence titles that were bestowed upon them in the Obama administration, spent a lot of time and effort making an entire political party believe that. If you went to a Democratic fundraising dinner or political dinner tonight and got asked the question, did Russia steal the election? And you said no, you'd be booed off the stage. And so I think you're downplaying what has actually happened here. One party and half the country believes an election was stolen, and that did not happen by accident. There's evidence here. A grand jury looking, and if it's as clean and mundane as you say, then these people ought to have nothing to worry about. But why shouldn't we look into it? The people who complain about misinformation and disinformation all the time, why does half the country believe something that didn't happen?
Well, half the country believes a lot of dumb stuff, including a lot of dumb stuff that comes from Republicans, but nobody's trying to put anybody in prison over it. Listen, we live in a.
They tried to put Donald Trump in jail, man.
Hold on a second. They tried to put Donald Trump in jail over stuff that he got indicted for, but the country went ahead and reelected him anyway. Look, my point is this. It is in fact the case. People believe a lot of wacky stuff and nutty stuff in my party and in your party. That is very different from the Department of Justice saying they're going to put somebody in prison over it. That's a different world. We've not been in a world before. Listen, you served in the White House. I served in the White House. The idea you're going to somehow now go to jail because people misinterpreted what you did in there, I think this is very, very scary stuff, man.
I got to jump in here. By the way, good to see Scott Jennings live from the Salem Radio studios there. He's got a 1-hour show. He's our colleague here. Salem owns Town Hall, where this show is produced as well. And he's just down the hall from the Town Hall offices there when he does his radio show. But you heard Van Jones there. Listen, people believe a lot of crazy things, but you don't throw them in jail for it. You don't bring up federal charges. And hold on a minute. No one wants to jail anybody because they believe Russia hacked the election and stole it on behalf of Donald Trump. Obviously, people do believe crazy things. No. We want to put in jail the people who harnessed our intelligence community, the CIA and the FBI, to create a federal document that reached that conclusion and fed that bogus story to the American people to compel them to believe that. People didn't just come up with this out of the blue. It was like Trump beats Hillary Clinton, and then suddenly, spontaneously, over 2/3 of Democrats in this country think, oh, well, it must have been Russia who stole it. No, people believe that crazy stuff. And thank you, Van Jones, for admitting that it's crazy. Took you a few years. People believe that because they were spoon-fed that information under the fake imprimatur of the intelligence community. The same ones who told you that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. How many times do intelligence agencies under the control of the federal government are going to lie to the American people about things until somebody actually pays a price for that? Why is Van Jones okay with that, by the way? Why is anyone who calls themselves a journalist, or for that matter, an American citizen, okay with the idea that we fund these giant spy organizations to create fake intelligence to try to convince us? They use it on us to propagandize us. Listen, if the CIA is propagandizing our enemies overseas, you can quibble with it, whether we should be engaged in that or not, but at least that's what the CIA is for. But when the CIA creates propaganda and fake intelligence to try to fool the American people? Why am I the only one who wants to see someone go to jail for that? Oh, come on. No, we are not trying to put in jail because people believe something that's crazy. All right, I'll let Scott Jennings pick it up from here.
Scott?
Look, I mean, we're obviously going to see this differently. And you and I have agreed about many things regarding the last few years. But on this, my view is that it has become obvious that what happened as Donald Trump was coming in and Barack Obama was going out bears some amount of investigation. And again, if you're right, all these people, they should have nothing to worry about. But there's a lot of people out there that have looked at this and decided that, intelligence was changed and ignored, and there were career people in the intelligence services saying we can't use the Steele dossier and so on and so forth. So at some point, people are just asking, how do you get accountability? Why does half the country believe Russia stole an election? Where is the accountability for that? Did people abuse their positions? Did they perjure themselves? Did they willfully mislead the American people? How do you get accountability for it? That's the question here.
Scott, can I ask you, though, is this, in your eyes, this would be the final judgment on that? It wasn't the Durham report. It wasn't the Senate Intelligence Committee run by Marco Rubio report. It wasn't the House and Senate efforts in the last 6-7 years to look into this. This is the final one. After this, you'll believe whatever it is?
Well, I mean, I would think so. I mean, typically an investigation like this from the justice system would be the end of the line. I mean, you'll find out whether anybody did commit criminal acts or not. And again, I don't know whether they did or they didn't. And so if Van is right and everything was above board and this was all just mundane policy differences, then I don't know why anybody would be worried about having their actions scrutinized. It seems to me that a hit dog hollers. And right now, the hit dogs are hollering. And I'm just telling you, enough has come forward for Republicans to believe that this bears a little bit more investigation.
We just see it differently. And listen, a grand jury that's not a little rock. That is somebody dropping a refrigerator on you if it comes through. And then you can spend 2 or 3 years.
I know. Donald Trump knows.
Well, and you can spend 2 or 3 years just proving that you're innocent, and you spend a whole bunch of money. And why are we doing this? Where it's damn near, I don't know how many hundreds of years later. I mean, the last like 6 months, it felt like 700 years. So I don't understand. Tulsi Gabbard has.
It's actually only 4.5 years since President Trump left office. It's only 4.5 years since he lost the 2020 election based on the rules that were set forth in that election. And a big part of that was the undermining of President Trump's ability to function as president because of this lie. Ridiculous. Oh, well, that's all in the past. That's old news. That's history. Please, they just convicted Trump of something that allegedly happened in the dressing room of a department store in the early 90s. That now they're using to say he's a convicted rapist, which he's not. So thank you. Spare me your, that happened so long ago. Guess what? If the statute of limitations is still active, then I don't care what your opinion is about how long ago it happened, number one. And number two, thanks for acknowledging that utilizing the Justice Department and lawfare to put people through hell, to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for attorney's fees to, as Van Jones just put it, prove your innocence. Which, thank you for acknowledging that that's how your system works, where people actually are presumed guilty and they have to prove their innocence. Thank you for acknowledging that that is hell that you would put somebody through on trumped up charges, because that's exactly what dear friends of mine had to go through during the first Trump administration, even without any charges being levied against them. Let me tell you about a guy named Carter Page, who is a Naval Academy graduate, a veteran of the U.S. Navy, who they pulled a FISA warrant on by claiming he was a Russian asset and a spy against his own country, when the guy's never been arrested for jaywalking. What kind of hell did you put him through? And when I say you, I mean James Comey and Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok.
Not put forward
and the Obama administration. So please spare me your concerns now. That's exactly the system that you created. That's exactly the system that you've used as a weapon in this entire escapade. And, oh, by the way, I do love the 2-on-1 with Scott Jennings. Well, will this finally put this to rest? I mean, will this be the end of it? asks the host. Let me ask you a question. I was told that getting a special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, and having him investigate Russian collusion would be the end of it. Was that the end of it? When you still have Democrats still claiming, they falsely claimed that the Mueller investigation proved Russian collusion when it never did. So spare me the double standards here that you're using. Yesterday was a great day for a lot of Republicans who finally feel vindicated over our position on the Russian collusion hoax that we've been holding for nearly a decade now. Tim Burchett, Congressman, told it like it was on Fox Business.
Intelligence showing former President Obama and his officials pushed a, quote, contrived narrative that Russia helped Trump win, selling it to the American people as if it was fact when it was not. You know, government reports concluded Trump never helped Russia hack into Democrat emails, never helped Russia push anti-Hillary propaganda with social media bots, or helped Russia hack into the vote and into the election infrastructure. They welcomed Russia's help, but there was no collusion. So how dangerous was this for the American people? Because America suffered for this for years.
Oh, it's very dangerous, the attempt to overthrow a sitting president or to divert him from becoming president again at the highest levels of government. Tulsi Gabbard brought the receipts. Anytime she wears that white suit, I know somebody's getting ready to get gutted, and they sure did, and they deserve it because she has the goods. As the young people say, she brought the receipts, and she's a class act, and she'll continue doing very well in that position, and I couldn't be happier for her. But I think America needs to realize there is a deep state. There is a group of people that meet and they revel in our misery, and because they have to be, because Donald Trump is just, all he's preached is success for this country and for our economy, for our military, energy independence, the things that we used to take pride in, they hate. And it's clear what their objective was a complete overthrow of this country.
Congressman Burchett is getting right up there with Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. Every time Tulsi Gabbard wears that white suit, I know somebody's going to get gutted. That's a great line. And well said. Also well said is anything that comes out of the mouth of Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, Stephen Miller.
The Russia collusion hoax against President Trump remains the single greatest hoax and the greatest assault on our democracy in the history of this country. There's no comparison. There's no parallel to anything else. It was a coup. And I'm using that term literally. It was a coup to overthrow a democratically elected government, a coup carried out by the intelligence apparatus of this country, by the deep state, by Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party. The new information that has been revealed by the Director of National Intelligence and by the FBI eliminates any scintilla of doubt about the intention, the premeditation, the planning and orchestration of this conspiracy. It meets all of the criminal elements of a seditious conspiracy against the United States. It meets the criminal elements of an insurrection. It meets the criminal elements of a conspiracy against the government and the criminal elements of a conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights under color of law. One egregious felony after another. And because it is a conspiracy, as demonstrated by the forethought of realizing and documenting that they understood that this was fake from the beginning, meeting the mens rea standard in law. Because of that, because it is a conspiracy, every single individual actor is now part of that conspiracy. So that includes Brennan and Clapper and Comey and Hillary and Schiff and everybody else who knowingly and willfully perpetrated this plot, this coup, this conspiracy, this scheme against President Trump and the government of the United States. And now is the time and the hour and the moment for accountability so that we can reclaim this democracy, Maria.
That was beautiful. It was brilliant. Love Stephen Miller. And you heard him detail a good handful of felonies there and articulated specifically what those felonies were, right? So at Fox Business, that's the kind of information and news you get from newsmakers. Over on CNN, you get their legal analyst, Ellie Honig, saying this.
So that's my question. I know I'm here to answer questions. What's the crime? I mean, what's even the potential crime? Seriously, I mean, I'm not trying to be confrontational here. Can anyone at this table even articulate what the potential crime might be?
I mean, election interference, manufactured intelligence,
not a crime, not a
deprivation
crime.
of
You're over
voter
two.
rights, obstruction of justice.
Okay, what
statements,
you've said a crime now. What is obstruction of justice?
And anything the grand jury says it is.
No, and to that point, let me further
But
say
most of
with
these
this.
crimes have a statute of limitation of
There
5
you go.
years.
That's where I was going next.
So that's
right?
the problem.
I mean, this is ancient history legally, right? The statute of limitations on almost every federal crime is 5 years. This stuff was 9 years ago.
There's an ongoing conspiracy, and so that could
Sure. If
extend
there's an ongoing
statute of
conspiracy that stretches
limitations.
into 5 years ago, then you would not have a statute of limitations problem. The crimes that Tulsi Gabbard has articulated, I don't know if she's a lawyer, she's definitely not at the Justice Department, are what treason and sedition. I mean, that means trying to overthrow the government and waging war against the United States. We are so far out over the edge here with this. And look,
yeah, I'll tell you what. Let's set aside treason and sedition here because those are Tulsi Gabbard's words, not mine. But Elaine Honig, he asked this somewhat rhetorical question to the panel and then waits for an answer and didn't like what he was hearing. And so he just sort of steamrolled over it. But the rhetorical question is, where's the crime? What's the crime? And just understand that this is where they're finding themselves. This is what they're left with. Oh, sure, Obama told the director of the CIA to come up with an assessment that matched what he believed he wanted the country and the world to hear, which was Putin favored Trump and helped interfere in the election to help him win, even though there's no evidence. But go ahead and put together that assessment and find whatever intelligence you can that supports it. But that's not a crime. That's what they're left with. To acknowledge that this happened or stipulate that it happened and then say, oh, but where's the crime? Which is a pretty tenuous place for them to be, I promise you. But I'll play Eli Honig's game here. What's the crime? I wasn't at the panel. CNN would never invite me. What's the crime? Okay, buckle up. Stick with me. Mark this on the video so you can share it, or you can go to my Substack, Larry VIP. It's up there now. What crime? Well, we got a few ideas. Let me blow it up for you. Number one, conspiracy to defraud the United States. That's a U.S. code. It criminalizes any conspiracy to impair, obstruct, or defeat the lawful functions of the U.S. government. That means getting in the way of the president from doing his job, getting in the way of the new administration hitting the ground, being able to hire people and actually function. That's conspiracy to defraud the United States. How about false statement to federal officials? We know. We've seen it on tape, John Brennan lying to members of Congress, but understand that members of the FBI, members of the CIA, including the heads of those divisions under Barack Obama, were all interviewed by Mr. Durham, the special prosecutor. If they continued the lie that, oh, we didn't use the Steele dossier, oh, we had verified intelligence, of course, we never, then they lied to federal officials. Obstruction of justice goes along with number two there. That includes the destruction of records, suppression of key intelligence. So if you have intelligence that overwhelmingly shows that there's no evidence that Russia favored Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton, and instead you draw out that one little fragment of a sentence that you believe supports that notion and you suppress the other intelligence, that's obstruction of justice. Suppression of key intelligence or targeted retaliation against investigators and whistleblowers. And we've got plenty of targeted retaliations against whistleblowers. How about FISA abuse and civil rights violations? I already told you about Carter Page and how they used the Steele dossier. James Comey signed that FISA warrant, and he's never been brought up on charges for using the known false Steele dossier to pull a FISA warrant. That's FISA abuse. That's a violation of Carter Page's civil rights. How about perjury before Congress? Already showed you the videos of John Brennan swearing under oath that they did not use the Steele dossier for the intelligence community assessment. And in fact, they did. In fact, John Brennan insisted that they use the Steele dossier for that. That's perjury. How about Hatch Act violations? That restricts federal employees from engaging in partisan political activity. That you can go all the way up to the president of the United States, but you'd have a tough one making that case with Barack Obama. But every single person involved in this, after the fact and during the fact. How about Peter Strzok and Andrew McCabe, who said they had an insurance policy just in case Trump wins the election? That's an overt political act to benefit Hillary Clinton and harm Donald Trump. That's a Hatch Act violation. How about misuse of federal funds or property? Taxpayer dollars indirectly routed through government contracts or intel operations to fund opposition research like the Steele Dossier, or to prop up the Steele Dossier, or used to pay an informant to support the false claims of the Steele Dossier, which we believe the FBI did under James Comey. That's misuse of federal funds or property. How about seditious conspiracy? Again, it's a rare one. If the intent was to remove or delegitimize a sitting president through fraudulent means and institutional abuse, some could argue this rises to seditious conspiracy. James Comey says that he leaked the fact that he briefed Donald Trump on the Steele Dossier, the P tape. He says that he did that because he thought it might move further toward getting a special prosecutor to investigate the president of the United States. You could argue that that was a seditious act to try to delegitimize or at the very least remove the president through his specific fraudulent actions. How about contempt of Congress, refusing to comply with lawful congressional subpoenas during an investigation into FISA abuse, the origins of Crossfire Hurricane, or the weaponization of intel? That could all merit prosecution and contempt of Congress, as Devin Nunes, the Republican in charge of the Intelligence Committee, who, by the way, his number one man there on the investigation was a then unknown lawyer named Kash Patel. They were obstructed left and right. Let's throw Adam Schiff in there while we're at it. Kash Patel is now the director of the FBI. Witness tampering or retaliation, that would be tampering with witnesses, retaliation against whistleblowers. Were honest actors inside the FBI or DOJ punished for telling the truth or refusing to go along? It's a key area of potential misconduct and something that should be investigated. Okay, Eli Honig, where's the crime? There's 10 crimes right there. And I only had about 45 minutes to put that together before today's show. Where's the crime? There's your crimes, Eli. There's your crimes. 10 crimes, and I only had about 45 minutes to put it together. I'm sure I could come up with more. Even better, I'm sure a U.S. attorney, along with the grand jury's assistance, could come up with more. I guess what I'm trying to say, Eli, if I may, you know what? I'm not going to say it. I got a bunch of friends here from the last several years who are going to say it for me.
Walls feel like they are closing in. But as the walls close in around the president,
Donald Trump feels the walls closing in.
I think this is a guy who feels like the walls are closing in.
the walls are closing in on him. Because the walls are closing in. The walls are closing in on the president.
Now the walls appear to be closing in.
Really kind of the walls closing in on him.
The walls are closing in because the walls are indeed closing in.
I think at this point, the walls are spinning.
The legal walls are closing in. The walls are closing in on President Trump.
The walls, meanwhile, are closing in on the president of the United States.
The walls closing in on President Donald Trump.
It appears that the walls are closing in on this president.
He feels that the walls are closing in on him.
The walls closing in on him.
The walls are closing in.
And the walls are closing in on
That the walls are closing in on the president.
Are the walls closing in?
The walls are closing in on the presidency.
He says as the walls begin to close around him. Is the political walls closing in on him?
This is a president that feels the walls closing in. The walls are closing in on Donald Trump.
I think the walls are finally closing in.
the walls, the walls,
The walls.
The walls,
the walls,
walls,
and the walls.
The walls are closing in.
Closing in.
closing in.
Closing in.
Closing in on.
It's closing in.
The walls
Are closing in on
President Donald Trump.
He's not looking forward to any of it. He's horrified. He's just talking big. The walls are closing in, as has been said before.
Yeah. The walls are closing in. It's true, but not on the guy they told you the walls were closing in on. Keep watching. We're all over this story, and we're not going anywhere.